Welcome to the podcast. Wanted to break down some of the characters involved in this recent car bombing in Russia that occurred on the weekend of August 20th of 2022. Just a look at some of the people involved so you have an understanding. We'll set it up and then we'll go into the rest of why this story is significant. Darya Dugina was the person who was killed in this car bombing. She's significant because she is the daughter of Alexander Dugin. Now, Alexander Dugin has long advocated the unification of Russian-speaking and other territories in a vast Russian empire. He's said to be Putin's brain, if you will. He wants that empire to include Ukraine, where Russian forces are currently carrying out what Putin calls a special military operation. Now, let's get you caught up on what happened over the weekend. Video that's on Twitter that shows the aftermath of the car bombing, perhaps just moments after the blast. And in this one frame, it's going to pan over, and you're going to see a man in a what appears to be green jacket, blue jeans. He was holding his hands on his head. That appears to be Alexander Dugin, the father himself. One thing that I kind of picked up on this, if you look at his shirt, there's going to freeze a frame there. His shirt is wearing a black shirt, and it's got kind of a white embroidery around it. Now, there were pictures posted earlier in the day in which he was attending a festival in which he was speaking. So that does appear to be him. It does appear that he was on scene in the aftermath of that explosion. And the video clip was actually blurred. There was another angle of from another video that showed a body of a person laying in the middle of the street. We have to assume that that was perhaps her. Perhaps she was blown out of the vehicle following the blast, and the vehicle then kind of crashed off the side of the road and began to burn. Just like her father, Daryan was fast becoming a high-profile figure within Russia. Now, she called herself a journalist. That's not what I would call her. She's more of a propagandist. And if you ask anyone in Ukraine, there's no love lost. In fact, in this one interview, translated in this interview, she says that Ukrainian soldiers should be tied up, and it should be some kind of a lynching or their heads placed on spikes, and that the people should decide what to do with Ukrainians, whether to kill them or torture them to death.
We got Darya in the house.
Hello. Hello, guys.
Yeah. And,
This is John in the house.
Yeah.
Now, I happened to stumble across another interview that was posted to YouTube back in June the 13th of 2022. The person who posted it is a John Mark Dugan. Don't know a whole lot about him right now. But in this interview, she's speaking English, and of course they're down in the port of Mariupol. That was the area that the Russians had taken over after a long fought-out battle with Ukrainians. So apparently they're giving the media a tour of the port, and in this interview, Darya is talking about how great the Russian soldiers performed.
And I think our Russian soldiers are extremely brave, incredibly strong, and ideologically very hot. And I think that's a Russian victory.
Meanwhile, back at the crime scene, Russian police, possibly Russian military, are out looking for evidence. They're picking up fragments and pieces off the road. I would make note of the giant desk at the end of the street, too. They're trying to take into account all the data that they receive. That's according to a release from the investigative committee of the Russian Federation. And early on, they've already started pointing at Ukraine, but there have been other notes that it may have been an inside job. It may have been an organization inside Russia itself that may have been behind this bombing. But for the most part, it appears that the Russian Federation is pointing fingers at Ukraine. Ukraine, at least at this point, has denied any responsibility for this bombing. Now, later in the day, as the story begins to develop, the Guardian newspaper came out with a report that says that a former member of Russia's Duma, who was expelled for anti-Kremlin activities, is claiming that Russian partisans are behind the car bomb. Now, speaking in Kyiv, where he is based, Ilyan Ponomarov alleged that the explosion on Saturday evening is the work of the National Republican Army, which he claims is an underground group working inside Russia and dedicated to overthrowing the Putin regime. The former deputy read what is said to be an NRA manifesto. And in that manifesto, they said that they declare President Putin a war criminal who amended the Constitution, unleashed a war between the Slavic peoples, and sent Russian soldiers to certain and senseless death. It's a story that will continue to develop throughout the next days and weeks to come.